Do you really think they remember us? Please. Gareth leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, looking out the large window of the orbital station. Below, Earth rotated, a blue and green marble, more peaceful than it had appeared in centuries. In the room with him sat a small gathering of old soldiers, veterans of wars long forgotten. They weren't young anymore, and the younger races in the galaxy had long stopped fearing humanity. But that was about to change. They don't need to remember, James replied, his voice steady. They'll be reminded soon enough. For the past few hundred years, the galaxy had been at peace, at least for those who weren't paying attention. Humanity had isolated itself, sidelined by choice. Other species wanted nothing to do with them, claiming humans were too aggressive, too dangerous. So, humanity retreated to the fringes, pushed away by a galactic council that preferred to forget them. For generations, humans thrived in their own systems, keeping to themselves. But while they were forgotten, the galaxy fell into disarray. Alliances crumbled, disputes between species grew heated, and the balance of power shifted. The Cathron Dominion, an empire of reptilian aliens, was on the verge of conquering half the known galaxy, ruling with an iron fist and obliterating any opposition. And that's when the calls started coming in. At first, it was whispers, a few desperate ambassadors from weaker species quietly asking if the humans still had their legendary fleets. Then, it became more open, more frantic. Requests for aid flooded human communication lines. Species once too proud or arrogant to speak to humans now begged for help. The Galactic Council, trembling under the pressure of Cathron expansion, reluctantly sent a formal request. They asked the humans to assist in negotiations. Gareth and James knew better. Negotiations were a thinly veiled plea for one thing: war. "You think we can pull this off?" Gareth asked, tapping his fingers on the table. "They've been handling things their way for so long. We're not the same as we used to be." "Doesn't matter," James said, walking over to the console. He flicked a switch, and a map of the galaxy appeared. Red zones marked Cathron-controlled territories. The map was nearly bleeding. "It's not about whether we can pull it off. It's about reminding them why they should have never forgotten in the first place. Humanity hadn't lost its edge. While the rest of the galaxy focused on treaties, trade disputes, and minor skirmishes, humans perfected their military technology. They turned war into a science, refined over generations. But it wasn't just technology. They had learned patience. Time, for humans, had become a tool just like any other. "We've already got the fleet on standby," James continued, scrolling through the data. 3 carriers, 24 assault ships, and enough firepower to remind every species why they used to tremble at our insignia. Gareth chuckled. "It's almost funny, isn't it? They thought they could manage without us. Now, they're about to find out what they've been missing." He stood, stretching his old bones. "I'm guessing we're not planning to do this quietly." James grinned. "Subtlety isn't really our thing." The door slid open, and a third man entered. His uniform was crisp, medals gleaming on his chest. Younger than the others, but his presence commanded the room. Captain Marcus, a rising star in the newly revived Terran fleet, had been handpicked to lead the charge. "We're all set," Marcus said, standing at attention. "The Council has officially authorized the mission. We're green-lit for full deployment." "Full deployment?" Gareth raised an eyebrow. "They're that desperate." Marcus nodded. "The Cathron just took over another system. The Council is in full panic mode. They'll agree to anything at this point." James smirked. "And here I thought they'd forgotten about us." "They tried," Marcus said. "But some things you just can't forget." Silence settled in the room, the weight of what was about to happen heavy in the air. They all knew the significance of their actions. It wasn't just about defending the galaxy from the Cathron. It was about showing that humanity hadn't gone soft, that Earth-forgotten power still loomed over the galaxy, waiting for the right moment to strike. Gareth broke the silence with a low whistle. "So, we're really doing this. Back into the fold after all this time." James clapped him on the back. Looks like it. And what happens after? Gareth asked. Once we remind them who we are. Marcus glanced at the map. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Boots echoed down the hall as soldiers boarded the ships. The station buzzed with energy, old veterans shaking off the dust and young recruits stepping into the legacy they had heard about since childhood. James watched as the first assault ship detached from the station, its engines glowing blue as it prepared to join the fleet. It's funny, he said. They wanted to leave us behind, thought they could handle everything on their own. Now, when they're on the verge of collapse, who do they call? Gareth laughed. I guess there's only so long you can ignore the people who wrote the book on warfare. As the ships lined up in perfect formation, the hum of engines filled the room. The old Terran insignia, a simple star and sword, adorned the side of every ship, a symbol that once inspired fear and respect in equal measure. It was about to do so again. We've been quiet long enough, Marcus said, staring out at the fleet. Let's remind the galaxy what happens when humanity steps back into the fight. With that, the first ship leapt into hyperspace, leading the way to a war that would make the galaxy remember. The Cathron fleet hung in space like a constellation of predators, each ship bristling with weapons and shields that had crushed hundreds of civilizations. Their leader, High Marshal Kesh, stood on the bridge of the largest dreadnought, surveying the battlefield with a mix of boredom and contempt. The Galactic Council's desperate attempts to mount a defense were pitiful. Patchwork fleets of smaller species barely holding the line. They sent more of these insects. Kesh growled, his reptilian eyes narrowing as the Council's ragtag fleet shuddered under another barrage. He turned to his second-in-command, whose scales shimmered nervously under the ship's lights. They did, High Marshal, the officer replied, but we detected something else. An unknown fleet just entered the system. We're running scans, but it doesn't match any known patterns. Kesh's eyes gleamed with interest for the first time in days. Unknown, you say? Yes, sir. It's large, very large. The ship configurations are unfamiliar, but they are advancing quickly. Kesh stepped forward, staring at the holographic map. Unknowns were rare, especially when so few dared to challenge their dominance. He watched as the mysterious fleet approached the front lines, moving with precision and speed. His claws tapped the metal railing. Send a hail, he ordered. Let's see who's foolish enough to challenge us. Moments passed, and the communication officer glanced up, confusion on his face. No response, sir. They are not even acknowledging our signal. Kesh grinned, baring sharp fangs. They'll regret that. Just then, the tactical officer's eyes widened as his console flared with warnings. High Marshal, enemy ships are locking onto us. I don't understand. They bypassed our jamming fields completely. Kesh's amusement vanished. Impossible. No fleet has that capability. Before he could give the order to fire, the first volley from the human fleet hit. Massive kinetic rounds smashed into the Cathron ships with surgical accuracy, shattering shields and tearing through hulls as if they were paper. Explosions lit up the battlefield, and entire sections of the Cathron's forward line disintegrated in seconds. On the human flagship, Captain Marcus watched the carnage with a steady gaze. Around him, the command crew worked efficiently, executing each command with the precision of well-rehearsed muscle memory. They didn't celebrate or cheer. This wasn't the time. The humans had no need for grand speeches or bravado. This was war, and war was what they were born for. How are the Cathron reacting? Marcus asked, his voice calm. Just as we expected, an officer replied. They are scrambling, trying to reorient their forces, but we've already broken their formation. Marcus allowed himself a small nod. Good. Keep the pressure on their flagship. Cut off their command structure. Gareth, sitting at a secondary station, glanced at the tactical display. You know, I almost forgot how effective we are at this. That's the problem, James said from across the room. They forgot too. The humans moved with precision that bordered on brutal efficiency. The Cathron, unprepared for an assault of this magnitude, scrambled to regroup, but their forces were already fractured. Each time they tried to reorganize, another human barrage shattered their lines, leaving chaos in its wake. On the Cathron flagship, Kesh's rage boiled over. Return fire. Destroy those ships now. He backed, his claws digging into the command panel. But even as he shouted the orders, he knew something was wrong. The humans were outmaneuvering them at every turn, striking their weak points with frightening accuracy. "High Marshal, our systems can't lock onto their ships," an officer yelled. "They're jamming technology. It's far beyond anything we've seen." Kesh slammed his fist against the console. "I don't care how advanced they are. We are the Cathron. We do not lose." But for the first time in his career, he felt something unfamiliar gnawing at the edges of his mind. Doubt. These humans, relics of a forgotten era, were not like the weak species he had crushed before. They were something else entirely. The human fleet continued to tear through the Cathron forces with ruthless precision. Their weapons were advanced, but it wasn't just technology that gave them the edge. It was their strategy, their ability to adapt, to exploit every weakness with surgical strikes. The Cathron fought with brute force. The humans fought with intellect and experience, honed over centuries. Incoming transmission from the Cathron flagship, one of the communication officers said, glancing at Marcus. Marcus nodded. "Put it through." Kesh's face appeared on the main screen, his eyes burning with fury. "Humans," he spat. "I thought your kind had vanished. Crawl back into the shadows where you belong." Marcus didn't flinch. "Looks like you were wrong. You dare challenge the Cathron Dominion? We have conquered half the galaxy. We will grind you into dust." "You've conquered half the galaxy because we weren't around to stop you," Marcus replied, his voice steady. "That changes today." Kesh's lips curled into a snarl. "You think you can stand against us? We outnumber you 100 to 1. Your arrogance will be your downfall." Marcus glanced at the tactical display, where the Cathron forces struggled to regroup. "This isn't arrogance. This is experience." With that, the transmission cut off, and the human fleet resumed its assault. Kesh roared in frustration, watching as his fleet was torn apart piece by piece. The humans were relentless, methodical. There was no mercy in their attacks, no hesitation, just cold, calculated destruction. As another Cathron ship exploded in the distance, Gareth leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "It's almost unfair." "Almost," James replied, eyes focused on the screen. "But fairness never mattered in war. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy is beginning to remember why humanity was once feared above all others." Kesh's dreadnought shuddered violently as another barrage tore through its defenses. Alarms blared, and the crew scrambled to regain control, their reptilian hands shaking as the ship buckled under the relentless assault. The once unstoppable Cathron fleet was now little more than debris scattered across the stars. Kesh's mind raced as he struggled to comprehend the disaster unfolding before him. "This can't be happening," he roared, slamming his fists onto the command console. "We are the Cathron. We don't lose." But even as he shouted the words, the truth settled in. They were losing. Badly. "High Marshal, our shields are failing. We've lost over 70% of our fleet." One of his officers shouted, voice trembling. We can't hold them off any longer." Kesh bared his fangs, refusing to accept the reality. "Prepare for a full retreat. Order the remaining ships to fall back to our secondary line." But there was no secondary line. Not anymore. The humans had destroyed it before it could even be established. Kesh's empire, the mighty Cathron Dominion that had ruled over countless worlds, was crumbling faster than he could respond. On the human flagship, Marcus watched the collapse of the Cathron fleet with the same steady calm he had maintained throughout the battle. The Cathron had been powerful, yes, but predictable. They relied on overwhelming force and the fear they instilled in their enemies. But fear meant nothing to humans. Not anymore. "Fleet status?" Marcus asked, his tone controlled. "Minimal damage across all ships," an officer reported. "We've lost none. They are falling apart. Good, Marcus replied. Target their flagship. It's time to end this. The tactical display zoomed in on Kesh's dreadnought, which limped away from the battlefield, desperately trying to escape the inevitable. Marcus leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing as he gave the final order. Fire! The human fleet unleashed its full might. A concentrated barrage of kinetic rounds and energy beams tore through the Cathron flagship, shattering its hull and sending debris spiraling into space. For a brief moment, Kesh stood in silence, watching as his empire, his entire life's work, disintegrated around him. We were supposed to be unstoppable, he whispered. How could this happen? And then the human barrage hit. The ship buckled, alarm screamed, and the viewports filled with fire and light. Kesh, High Marshal of the Cathron Dominion, was no more. As the wreckage of the flagship drifted through space, the remaining Cathron ships surrendered, one by one. Their once proud fleet was now little more than a collection of battered survivors, scattered and broken. On the human flagship, the mood was quiet and professional. There was no celebration, no boasting. This was just another mission completed with the same cold efficiency that humanity had perfected over centuries. All enemy ships are standing down, one of the officers reported. We've won. Gareth leaned back in his chair, rubbing his tired eyes. Well, that went better than expected. James chuckled softly. We knew it would. They never stood a chance once we got serious. Marcus turned to face the bridge crew, his expression unreadable. Send a message to the Galactic Council. Tell them the Cathron Dominion is finished. And what about the rest of the galaxy? Gareth asked. They've all been watching this, you know. Every species out there just saw what we did. They wanted us back, Marcus said simply. Now they've got us. A moment of silence followed, the implications of that statement hanging in the air. For centuries, humanity had stayed on the sidelines, watching as the galaxy played its games of politics and power. But now, the game had changed. The galaxy called on humanity for help, and humanity answered. And in doing so, they reminded everyone why they were feared in the first place. We won't go back to being forgotten, James said quietly. They'll never forget again. Marcus nodded, eyes fixed on the stars outside the viewport. No, they won't. As the human fleet began to regroup, preparing to return to their home systems, a single transmission came through from the Galactic Council. It was a message of thanks, of gratitude, and of relief. But buried within it was something else, fear. Fear that the humans, now reawakened, might not stop with just the Cathron. Do you think they're afraid of us now? Gareth asked, glancing over at Marcus. They should be, Marcus replied without hesitation. We didn't come here to conquer, but now they know what we're capable of, and they'll think twice before ever sidelining us again. The fleet continued its quiet retreat into hyperspace, leaving behind the debris of the Cathron fleet as a stark reminder to the galaxy. Humanity had returned, not as conquerors, but as a force to be reckoned with, a forgotten power that had just proven it could still turn the tide of any war. Gareth stretched and yawned. You know what's funny? What's that? James asked. They thought they were calling in a relic, something ancient forgotten. Turns out, they were just calling in the future. Marcus allowed himself a small smile at that, though his eyes remained on the stars. The galaxy had changed today, and they all knew it. But humanity's role in that galaxy had only just begun. Let's head home, Marcus said, standing from his chair. We reminded them who we are. That's enough for now. And with that, the fleet disappeared into the void, leaving behind a galaxy that would never be the same.